if we are going to be genuine with ourselves, we need to address two simple things. Number one, listen to the Kenyan in economic pain. Number two, solve the constitutional problems that make this Kenyan who feels in pain feel like Parliament does not represent him. That is the solution.
The cost
but do you agree, first of all, that all this political, stall is choreographed to meet personal ends?
Remember why I started, Mark? I'll remind you. I said, politicians will always take an economic situation and use it for political ends. That is the combination of politics. What the people want, meeting what the politicians want. That is how it works. Now, by no means, I do not think there is a saint in Azimio or in Kenya Kwanza who's going to save us from our doldrums.
Okay.
What we need to do is to keep agitating as a people to force those who claim to represent us to accurately represent us.
Okay, you did say that, and I want you to respond to this as well, Gabriel, just to answer this question, because it's been in the headlines, that the leader we need needs to have or to be the symbol of national unity.
Yes.
5 days ago, the president said and tweeted, "My friend Raila Odinga, I'm off to Tanzania for a human capital meeting to harmonize the expansion of employment opportunities in our continent. I'm back tomorrow evening, and as you have always known, I'm available to meet one-on-one with you anytime at your convenience."
And then the reply
given to him.
the reply that came is, well, where's niongelesha kwa Twitter bana?
But that is national unity.
Yes.
Yeah?
No, not only that, Mark. I mean, there was a time these two leaders met in Yao Stadium. The thing I want us to run away from is this creation, and I don't know where it came from. I don't want to say it's the media that created it, but it was created somewhere, that these two individuals, or these two great leaders, cannot talk. They have each other's numbers. They can really, Kwanza probably, I believe on speed dial, you know. You have also to look at them historically, where they've come from, whether you're looking at President William Ruto as a member of ODM, whether you're looking at President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2002, when, the presidency went to Kibaki, him and the current President William Ruto were left in the cold. So you are talking about a friendship that has been created over time. But I would also hate to believe that they cannot talk to each other. I mean, I would highly want to dissuade anybody who would think that these two great leaders cannot, or three leaders cannot talk.
As it's been in the headlines, do you believe that
No, I
talks
don't think
have
so.
happened?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And if they were to ever meet and have a discussion, I had the leader of majority saying, if it's having a conversation with Honorable Raila Odinga, let it be in front of people, because if we are talking about the things that are ailing Kenyans, for instance, the cost of living, and that's why I think this is what you call creative suffering. The cost of living, really, I was, again, discussion about cooking oil, and Kenya being really nearly a net exporter of such a commodity. What can we do? Whether you're looking at industrial sugar or cooking oil, what can we do in the meantime? Because we don't set the prices. Mark, we really don't. So when somebody tells you, importer XYZ adjusted their cost because they cannot run a business through losses, you have to adjust. The shopkeeper here has to adjust their prices. It's only given. And that's why you hear people saying, oh, the global food prices. That's why it's not a Kenyan problem. Okay. We have just found clever politicians who have made it an agenda as if Kenya is the only country that's suffering from these issues. So anyway, to finalize on what you asked, I think, and I really believe, President William Ruto meant well with the tweet that he tweeted. And if he was to invite Honorable Raila Odinga, what would be the conversation? That's what Kenyans want to know. Would it be anything to do with a handshake? Because many people, when they hear handshake, their ears become red. Because I would honestly not want there to be another handshake which did not solve anything, you know. I would also not want us to create, like the president said, another mongrel where you do not know who is running government, whether the government is in opposition or the opposition is in government. You have no idea. It confused so many people. Yet at the same time, you have common Mwananchi saying, man, you rode on everything that was against the handshake. So you cannot be the first person to do this. So I can understand where the president is also tied in to try and stick as much as possible to the Constitution.
And as you answer, as a political analyst, why is one side, especially Azimio, quick to say the talks have taken place, and the other side, especially Kenya Kwanza, no such thing has happened?
You know, we must understand and position this conversation correctly.
Yeah.
The fact is that commodity prices are going up.
Okay.
But the fact is they're going up even more because they're being taxed more, right? So that's one. And there is, if you look at the agendas that, if you look at Kenya Kwanza, leaders are saying, oh, look, it was never about the cost of living, it was about jobs. And then Azimio is saying, no, 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 first agenda is cost of living. Why is this a critical sticking point? And why are these leaders waxing hot and cold about whether talks have happened or not?
Yeah.
The reason they're waxing hot and cold is because, number one, the president himself ran on a no handshake basis. Number two, Raila Odinga has sung himself hoarse saying he doesn't want a handshake, right? In fact, quite crudely saying that he would not like to shake someone's hand in the presidency. So we've got two politicians who have set up the stage of not having a handshake. But let us pause for a minute and ask ourselves, what does a handshake mean?
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems I have with our collective memory as a country is how we like to politicize things so much that we don't recognize what they are. Gabe has correctly pointed out that when Kibaki and Raila had a joint leadership of the country, not only did we have one of the most peaceful times, we had one of the most prosperous times. In terms of our GDP, for the first time, grew beyond 10%. I remember I was in studio when Uhuru Kenyatta did a handshake with Raila Odinga. And I remember the environment and the tweets and the messages and how the studio felt, and we were reading tweets from across the country, how Kenya breathed a collective sigh of relief.
Okay.
What happened later in terms of the fight between now Uhuru and Ruto is completely unfortunate, because it is that fight that we are dealing with now. I want to say that I have supported handshakes from 2007. Will support them to date. And I'll tell you why. If you go read the comments when President William Ruto says, my brother Raila Odinga, I'm off to Tanzania, I want us to talk. If you notice how that statement brings temperatures down.
Yeah.
Handshakes are not about dividing government. They should not be. In the United States, and the last 5-6 years, since 2016, okay, it's more, 8 years, since there was this huge Democrat versus Republican fight given Trump, every time they have bipartisan talks, they go to the White House and the Republicans say we want these changes, and the Democrats say we want these changes, and they sit down and have a handshake about the budget, have a handshake about raising the debt ceiling, have a handshake about how the budget should be. Now that handshake, I do not understand why anyone has an issue with it. It does not deter opposition from being opposition. But that conversation where two people who disagree come together to agree for the good of the country, I will support it till the day I die. I will not buy into this political narrative that when leaders who were political rivals before talk, it is a bad thing. It is the reason why many counties, including the one I was born in, Gabe, projects are stopping in Nakuru. Why? Because the current governor doesn't like the former governor, so the projects the other governor were doing needs to stop. It is childishness. It is utter childishness. And there's nothing wrong saying, you disagree with my budget proposal. What is your proposal? Can we come to a compromise? That, my friend, I will always be on the side of that handshake, whether I remain as the one Kenyan against 57.9 million others who don't.
unless probably.
Would you support the same for what it represents?
Well, if you're saying that, first of all, I think we've demonized the handshake because of what it did in the last government. I told you when I saw the two leaders in Nyayo Stadium, they were shaking hands, they were enjoying, they were laughing, you know, as the sport continued. You saw Manyala performing very well, we saw Faith Kipyegon and everybody else. It was a happy moment. So would you really look inside that and say that handshake meant something? Unless you're talking about a handshake that has a political narrative behind it. And I think that's what Kenyans don't want. But if you're talking about these two leaders sitting down, one has already offered an olive branch. You say, these are the things that you're having problems with. Let us set a bipartisan committee. And Mark is right. In the US, bipartisans, they will work. And I'll be the first one to admit that, for sure, dialogue is what changes things. Dialogue anywhere changes things. The streets and demonstrations, you may think they will work, but hardly. At the end of the day, people must sit down and agree about civility, because that's the only thing we can't buy. All right? Peace is the only thing. Once absent, nobody will win. So on this one, I would agree. The issue that most Kenyans that I know, would say we wouldn't want to see an environment that was there in the past, where, again, you do not know who's in government and who's outside government. I think that's what Kenyans may be. Because really, the accountability, half of the questions that we are asking today were asked back then. And the answers were so different back then, primarily because somebody felt they were in government. And to me, that's what worries me.
That's what we should avoid.
Yeah, that's what we should avoid. But if we are meeting, for instance, if you're talking about handshaking and talking to people, Mark will agree with me. The current president, he's been nearly to each and every corner of this country. And what is he doing there? Is he not communicating with people? Is he not doing handshakes with people? Those are the people who matter. Yes, at the end of the day, probably a leader would matter, yes. But the people who really feel the issues on the ground are the people he meets on a daily basis. He's been in the coast of Kenya. He went all the way up to Nyanza. He was talking with Nyanza leaders the other day about, I can't believe, was it capital fish? He was thinking about how are you still importing fish? Can you imagine? Yeah. So those are some of the things that I feel we should be discussing as far as handshakes are concerned. First of all, do as many handshakes as possible with the people, those who elected you as well as those who did not elect you. You cannot tell me, and probably for the longest time, as long as I live, I will have a problem, even though I know there's a solution to it. And I know many people may answer very different from what I would answer, that peace may be pegged on an individual. I fail to understand. And that is why somebody said democracy can only work if the majority of the population are educated. That's why democracy and edification go hand in hand. Because the minute you're able to interpret things and say, no, 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 this can work for us. This, we don't need it. I mean, if you guys want to have a handshake and be like brothers, so be it. If you want him to be your brother, so be it. There was a time the president said, if it takes me to call you my brother, I'll do that. In every sentence, I'll do that. So if they want to do something on the side, let them have a seat, let them have tea, let them communicate. But at the end of the day, if we are to be in line with our constitutionalism, then it is only good for this country that we are able to divorce the politics of the day, the development agenda, wanting to know what it will represent for the future of leader A, B, C. It would be more important, Mark, if the governor of Nakuru, both of them, are able to sit down in the absence and discuss what you're discussing. That people can see change. It does not matter who is the governor as long as he is able to do good by the people. I think that, Mark, that's the only way we will progress as a country.